The overnight shift at Ridgeway Pharmacy had a way of making the fluorescent lights feel personal, like they were designed specifically to drain the last bit of warmth from a room that had none to spare. Owen Hartley noticed the woman first because of her shoes. He had learned to notice shoes before faces. 12 years working as a paramedic had taught him that shoes told you whether someone had time to think before leaving the house. The woman restocking the cold medicine aisle wore hospital-grade non-slip flats, the kind that cost $40 and lasted 2 years if you spent most of those years on your feet. They were scuffed at the toe and split slightly along the left sole. Not the shoes of someone who had forgotten to upgrade. The shoes of someone who had not had time to think about it. Owen stood near the back of the pharmacy, waiting for his daughter's prescription to be filled. Cora had been fighting a chest infection for 6 days, and the walk-in clinic had finally given them something stronger than the first antibiotic that had done nothing. She was 9 years old and had spent most of the last week sleeping on their couch because the stairs to her room felt too long at 2 in the morning when her breathing went shallow. It was close to 9 at night. The pharmacy had 30 minutes before closing. There were 3 other customers, a retired man reading the blood pressure monitor display, a young couple whispering over a printed insurance form, and a man in an expensive olive coat standing near the prescription counter with his arms crossed, and the particular stillness of someone who had been waiting long enough that his patience had curdled into contempt. Owen watched the woman with the worn shoes approach the prescription counter. She said something quietly, something apologetic in tone before she even finished the sentence, and Owen understood without hearing the exact words that she was explaining a delay. The man in the olive coat moved before she finished speaking. "I've been standing here for 22 minutes, he said, loudly enough for the retired man at the blood pressure monitor to look up. "I was told 15. That's not a small error. That's incompetence." The woman did not flinch, exactly, but her right hand moved to the edge of the counter and gripped it the way people grip things when they are absorbing impact instead of showing it. "I'm very sorry, Mr. Strickland. The system flagged your insurance for secondary verification and—" "I don't need the technical explanation," Strickland said. "I need the prescription I was promised 20 minutes ago." Owen picked up a basket near the vitamin aisle and moved slowly down the row of shelves closest to the counter. Not intervening, just closer. The woman pulled up something on the computer and her voice stayed professionally steady. "We're almost through the verification. It should be another 5 minutes. Strickland leaned forward. "You know what the problem with this location is? Every time I come in here, it's the same thing. The same delays, the same excuses. Management knows about this, by the way. I understand your frustration." "No," Strickland said, cutting her off. "You don't understand anything. You fill pills and apologize. That's the entirety of the job description." In the back corner of the pharmacy, Owen set down the basket. He heard the retired man near the blood pressure machine put something down on a shelf with more force than necessary, which told him he was not the only one in the room who had just felt something harden. Owen walked to the counter. He did not rush. He came to stand 2 feet away from Strickland and looked at the woman behind the counter directly. She was in her early 40s, he estimated, dark circles under her eyes that came from schedule, not cosmetics. A small enamel pin on her lanyard of the kind pharmacies gave staff for 5-year service anniversaries. "Excuse me," Owen said, not to her but to the general space between them, and when Strickland turned, Owen added, "I just wanted to make sure I heard you right. Did you just tell her what her job description is?" Strickland looked at him the way people look at something unexpected that they have not yet decided whether to dismiss. His coat was expensive, his watch was visible. His expression carried the practiced quality of a man accustomed to the room understanding his priorities without explanation. "This doesn't involve you." "It did when you said that loud enough for everyone in here to hear it," Owen said. The woman behind the counter had gone very still. Owen kept his voice level. He was not angry, exactly. He had learned to separate the feeling from the voice a long time ago. When you worked emergencies long enough, you understood that volume rarely helped and calm rarely failed. She's doing her job. The insurance verification isn't something she controls. If you want to be upset about the system, be upset about the system. But talk to her like that again, and I'm going to ask you to take it outside. Strickland's chin lifted. "And who exactly are you?" "Someone who's been waiting longer than you and hasn't said a word about it," Owen said, which isn't heroic. That's just how waiting works. A beat passed. The couple with the insurance form had stopped pretending to look at it. Strickland's expression shifted through something complicated and landed on dismissal. "This is a waste of my time." He turned back to the counter. "I'll be filing a formal complaint." "That's your right," the woman said, her voice finally at something close to normal register. Owen stepped back and returned to the vitamin aisle. His heart was doing something slightly faster than it should have been, which he noted clinically the way he noted everything physical these days. 3 minutes later, while he was reading the label on a bottle of vitamin D, the woman appeared beside him. She was not wearing her lanyard anymore. She had taken it off and held it loosely in one hand. "Thank you," she said quietly. "It wasn't anything," Owen said. "It was something," she said. "He comes in every 2 weeks. It's always different and always the same." Owen nodded once. "I know the type." She looked at him for a moment with the particular steadiness of someone who was reading more than the surface. "Prescription for Hartley? That's us. It's ready whenever you are." She turned, then paused. "There's no charge tonight." Owen started to object, and she stopped him with something direct in her expression that made the objection feel unnecessary. "I own this location," she said. "I can do that." Owen did not have an answer ready for that. She walked back toward the counter, replaced her lanyard, and picked up a clipboard that had nothing to do with the previous conversation, and Owen stood in the vitamin aisle for another moment, holding a bottle of vitamin D he had not intended to buy, revising something he had assumed without knowing he was assuming it. By the time he reached the counter to collect Cora's prescription, Strickland had already gone. The retired man was leaving with a paper bag. The young couple had found their answer and looked relieved. The woman, her name tag said Vivian, slid the prescription bag across the counter with a receipt already removed. Owen accepted it without comment. "How old is your daughter?" she asked. "9, he said. "She's had worse. She'll be fine by the weekend." Vivienne looked at him with the expression adults use when they recognize something in other adults that does not need naming. That's the voice of someone who has done this alone for a while. Owen did not deny it. Her mother passed 4 years ago. Vivienne absorbed that without pity, which he appreciated more than she probably knew. "So did my husband," she said simply. "Driving, not illness." "Cora's a good name. My wife chose it," Owen said. Outside, the October wind had the sharp bite of a Canadian October that apologized for nothing. Owen sat in his truck for a minute before starting it, Cora's prescription on the passenger seat where he always put important things so he wouldn't forget. He looked at the pharmacy window, where the lights inside were still on, and Vivienne's silhouette moved behind the counter with the efficient economy of someone who had learned to work in the margins of a long day. He started the truck and drove home. He did not think about it again that night because Cora woke up coughing at midnight and needed water, and then needed the television on low, and then needed him sitting at the end of the bed until she fell back asleep at 1:30 in the morning. That was the nature of the job. The thoughts that belonged to him happened in the spaces his daughter did not need. The next morning was a Thursday. Owen dropped Cora at school, went to the station for a 6-hour day shift, and came home to find a notice on his door from the building's property management company. He had rented the same unit on Birchwood for 7 years. The notice informed him that due to a restructuring of the building service contracts, a third-party inspection would be scheduled within 90 days, and occupants whose lease included commercial variance permits. Owen ran a small first-aid training operation from a converted corner of his unit, technically under a home occupation permit, might be subject to revised terms. He read it twice, then set it on the counter beside the prescription bag he had not thrown out yet. The restructuring was handled by a property group called Meridian Consolidated. He recognized the name only because it had appeared twice in recent months on signs outside local properties being renovated. He had not known it was connected to Birchwood. He pulled up the name on his laptop and read for 15 minutes, then closed the tab when Cora called from the other room to say she was hungry. He made dinner. He did not call the number on the notice. He had learned that calling numbers on notices only confirmed you had read them. 2 days later, Owen was back at Ridgeway Pharmacy. Cora's infection was improving, but the pharmacist at the station had asked him to confirm she had finished the full course, and he had miscounted. Vivienne was behind the counter. She saw him immediately, and the acknowledgement was subtle, a slight adjustment of posture, a pause in what she was doing, before she returned to the customer in front of her. Owen waited near the consultation window until the customer moved away, then stepped forward. "Day 6, he said. "She's better. I just wanted to make sure I had the count right." Vivienne checked the prescription notes, asked 2 clinical questions that told him she actually knew what she was talking about, and confirmed the protocol. Then she looked at him with the same directness as before. "You look like you slept 3 hours, she said. 4, Owen said. "We had a good night." She almost smiled. "Is that what you tell people?" "Usually I tell them she's fine and I'm fine," he said. "It's faster." There was a small pause that did not feel like silence as much as like 2 people measuring something without admitting they were measuring. "The man who was here the other night," Vivian said. Gerald Strickland. Owen waited. He filed a complaint against the location. He said staff behavior had been hostile and that a non-staff member had verbally threatened him. Owen absorbed this. Threatened, his word. I asked him to step outside. I know what you said. I also have the in-store camera. She set both palms flat on the counter and looked at him steadily. The complaint won't go anywhere, but I wanted you to know he made it, because he tends not to stop at one. Owen nodded slowly. How does he have the standing to file a complaint against a pharmacy he doesn't work for? He's on the board of the Professional Oversight Committee that licenses regional pharmacy chains, Vivian said, with the complete evenness of someone delivering information they had long since processed emotionally. He reviews renewal applications once a year. Owen set his hands on the counter, mirroring her posture without intending to, so he can create problems for your license. He can delay things, she said, which is its own kind of problem when you have 2 other locations and an expansion in progress. Owen looked at her for a long moment. Why are you telling me this? Because if he escalates toward you personally, I'd rather you know the context than be caught off guard. Outside, the first real snow of October had started. Light, barely sticking, the kind that disappeared by afternoon, but reminded everyone it was serious about coming back. Owen left the pharmacy and sat in his truck again. He called Cora's school to confirm pickup and then sat for another minute watching the snow. He thought about Gerald Strickland's olive coat and the way a man like that understood rooms before he entered them. Owen had met men like that in different settings. They were not rare. What was rare was someone who had enough to lose and stood in front of them anyway. He thought, without wanting to, that Vivian Lau was that kind of person. He drove back to the station. By Monday, 2 things had happened. First, the property management notice on his door had been followed by an email from Meridian Consolidated that was friendlier in tone and more threatening in content, suggesting that commercial activity from residential units created liability concerns that would be addressed in the next review period. Second, a colleague at the station mentioned that the first aid training contracts Owen supplied to 3 local community centers had been flagged for review by whoever coordinated their insurance. Owen stood in the station locker room and understood, in the deliberate way you understood something you had been hoping, was coincidence, that it was not coincidence. Strickland had not filed a single complaint. He had made calls. Owen drove to Ridgeway Pharmacy after his shift. It was a Tuesday afternoon, slow traffic, gray sky with the particular flatness that arrived in October and stayed through April in this part of Ontario. Vivian was not behind the counter. A younger staff member directed him to the small office at the back of the pharmacy, where Vivian was on a phone call that she ended when she saw his face. He went after your contract, she said, before Owen could speak. And my lease, Owen said, through a property company called Meridian. Something shifted in Vivian's expression. Not surprise, something more internal than surprise. Meridian is one of Strickland's private holdings, she said. Owen sat down in the chair across from her desk without being invited. She did not object. You knew that. I knew he had property interests in this district. I didn't know he had reached into your building. She looked at the window, then back at him. He's expanding the scope because you're easier to pressure than I am. I have legal standing and documentation. You have a home occupation permit and community contracts, which is why he moved on me first, Owen said. Vivian closed the folder on her desk. I need to tell you something I should have told you the other night. Owen waited. I was in the pharmacy as a customer that evening, not as the owner. I come in sometimes without identifying myself because I want to see how the location runs when management isn't watching. That's why I was in street clothes, and why the staff didn't introduce me. She looked at him directly. When Strickland started, I let it continue longer than I should have because I was observing. I was noting how the staff handled pressure, and then you intervened, and I lost the observation and gained a problem. Owen heard this. He thought about the worn shoes, the 5-year pin, the deliberate absence of the lanyard before she told him she owned the place. You were watching him, Owen said. I've had 3 formal complaints from staff at this location about his behavior over 14 months. I needed direct observation to escalate to the oversight board. She paused. He's on the oversight board, but he's not the entire board, and there is a process. But I needed documentation that didn't come from my own employees, because he would say they were coached. So the camera, she confirmed, which now shows you stepping between him and a staff member he was verbally demeaning. Which is not the footage I needed for a licensing complaint, but it's not nothing. Owen looked at his hands. I didn't know any of this when I walked over there. I know, Vivian said. That's why it matters. The office was quiet for a moment. Somewhere in the pharmacy outside, someone dropped something and apologized, and someone else said it was fine. What does he want from you? Owen asked. Vivian's expression did not change, but something around the edges of it did. My expansion application goes before the Regional Health Authority next month. 3 new locations, he's on the advisory panel. If he moves to oppose, it delays by 6 months minimum. She folded her hands on the desk. He's been opposed to independent pharmacy growth in this district for 4 years. Every time a small operator tries to expand, there's a review. Some of them stop trying. Some of them sell. He has business partners who buy. Owen stared at her. He's building a monopoly. He's protecting one, she said. Outside the office window, the last of the afternoon light was going. Owen had 40 minutes before Cora's after-school program ended. What would actually stop him? Owen asked. A formal complaint from a non-affiliated party with documentation submitted before my expansion review. She said it carefully. Not something I can suggest to you. Not something I should benefit from asking. But you're telling me the timeline. I'm telling you the timeline, she said. Owen stood up. I need to pick up my daughter. I know, Vivian said. He was halfway to the door when she said, Owen. He turned. She had not used his name before. He's going to escalate your lease situation this week. I'd have the home occupation permit and your training records documented and ready. Owen nodded and left. He picked up Cora from after school, listened to a detailed description of a disagreement between 2 of her classmates that had apparently involved significant injustice, and made pasta carbonara because it was her favorite, and she was still pale around the edges from the infection. After she was in bed, he sat at the kitchen table with the home occupation permit and every contract folder he owned, and went through each one for 3 hours, making a record that was clean and complete. On Wednesday, he called the Regional Health Authority's complaint line and asked about the process for a non-affiliated party filing documentation related to a licensing board member's conduct. The person on the other end was cautious but informative. On Thursday morning, Cora asked why he was up before 6. Making sure things are in order, he said. She looked at him with the expression 9-year-olds used when they understood more than adults assumed. Is it the stuff from the pharmacy? Owen looked at her. You knew about that? You've been doing that face, she said. The one where you're figuring something out but you don't want to worry me. He pulled her into a side hug and held on for a second longer than necessary. It's almost sorted, he said. Does the pharmacy lady need help? I think maybe yes, Owen said. Cora considered this with the focused seriousness she brought to everything. Then you should help her, she said, as if the answer were obvious enough that the question barely needed asking. She gave us free medicine. He laughed, which surprised him, and she looked pleased at having caused it. On Friday, Owen submitted the formal complaint documentation. He included his own account of the Tuesday evening incident, a detailed timeline of the subsequent contract and lease pressures, and a request that the Regional Health Authority investigate whether Gerald Strickland's position on the Licensing Oversight Committee had been used to conduct personal retaliation against both a pharmacy owner and a private individual with no professional standing in the industry. He attached the property connection to Meridian Consolidated, sourced from public records he had found himself. He sent a copy to a journalist whose byline he had seen on 2 previous articles about regulatory conflicts in regional healthcare, not asking for anything, just providing documentation. He did not tell Vivian what he had submitted until it was done. When he did tell her, he called the pharmacy and she picked up herself. There was a pause on the other end of the line that told him she was deciding how to respond to something she had not expected. You didn't have to do that, she said. No, Owen said. But you told me the timeline, another pause. The home occupation permit review, she said. Did you hear back? Meridian canceled it this morning. I think someone made a call. He let that sit for a moment. I don't know if it was you. It wasn't, Vivian said, but I made a different call. To the Regional Property Standards Office. About 4 other Meridian tenants who contacted me after I mentioned publicly that I was documenting Strickland's business connections. Her voice was precise and deliberate. You were not the only one he pressured. You were just the most recent. Owen leaned against the kitchen counter and looked out the window at Birchwood Street, where the October leaves had finally given up and come down completely. How many? 11, she said. Over 3 years, he exhaled slowly. That's not regulatory overreach. That's a campaign. Yes, Vivian said, which is why what you submitted matters more than if I'd submitted it alone. I have standing, you have credibility. They're different things and they're both useful. The journalist published a piece 11 days later. It was not dramatic. It was carefully sourced and specific. A board member's undisclosed conflict of interest, a pattern of regulatory delays correlated with competing business acquisitions, 11 named complainants including a paramedic with no financial interest in the outcome. Gerald Strickland requested a leave of absence from the Oversight Committee the same afternoon the article appeared. His leave became a resignation 6 days after that. Vivian's expansion application went before the Regional Health Authority without opposition 3 weeks later. Approved on the first review. Owen heard about it from Cora. Vivian had called the house while he was on shift and Cora had answered. They had apparently talked for 4 minutes, which Cora reported as a long time, and which included Vivian asking what Owen's favorite kind of coffee was, which Cora had answered with complete accuracy because she had watched him make it every morning for 4 years. Owen stood in the kitchen after his shift and looked at his daughter, who was eating toast and reading a book and acting entirely as though none of this required comment. "You told a stranger my coffee order," he said. "She's not a stranger," Cora said, without looking up. "She's the pharmacy lady." He sat down across from her. Outside, November had arrived and made no apology about it. Cold, definite, the kind of Canadian November that stayed. "Did she say anything else?" Cora turned to Paige. "She said thank you, and that she'd stop by this week if that was okay." She looked up at him with the patient expression children saved for adults who made things complicated. "I said it was okay." Owen looked at his hands, then at his daughter, then at the window. "That's fine," he said. Cora returned to her book. "Also, I told her you make good pasta." He almost told her that was too much information, then decided it wasn't. A week later, Vivian came by on a Saturday afternoon with a coffee from the place on Meridian that was not the property company, just a coincidence of naming that Owen found privately funny. She sat across from him at the kitchen table while Cora showed her a school project about the water cycle with the focused seriousness of someone presenting to an audience that had earned their seat. Vivian listened to the entire presentation without checking her phone. She asked 2 questions at the end that made Cora visibly pleased. Then Cora declared she had homework and disappeared upstairs with the cheerful efficiency of a child who had decided adults needed space and had arranged it herself. Owen refilled both coffees. "You didn't have to come," as he said. "I wanted to see the place where someone decided to file a complaint on behalf of a stranger," Vivian said. 11 strangers, Owen said. 11, she agreed. The kitchen was quiet in the way it was quiet on weekend afternoons when nothing needed to happen immediately. Outside, the first real snowfall of November had started, the kind that stuck this time, that laid itself down without apology, and meant it. Owen watched it for a moment. "She said you listened to the whole water cycle project," he said. "It was thorough," Vivian said. "She's meticulous. She gets that from somewhere. Her mother," Owen said. Vivian looked at him without the performative sympathy people defaulted to when that sentence appeared, and he was grateful again for the same reason as before. "She must have been," Vivian said. "She also clearly gets some of it from you." Owen looked at the snow. He had not planned any of this. Not the pharmacy, not the complaint, not the Saturday afternoon or the coffee or the water cycle project. He had gone in to pick up medicine for a sick kid and had come home 7 weeks later with something he had not been looking for and had not known he was missing. That was the thing about doing the right thing when nobody expected it. It did not always cost what you thought it would. Sometimes it paid in a currency you had forgotten existed. Outside, the snow kept falling on Birchwood Street, quiet and unhurried, settling into the kind of permanence that asked nothing in return.